A new report shows CEO pay in Canada broke records in 2022. The country's 100 highest paid CEOs were paid an average of $14.9 million that year. That's according to the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. Now that amount is up from $14.3 million in 2021. That works out to more than $7,100 an hour, which is 246 times more than what the average Canadian worker makes. The report says that the average worker saw their pay rise 3% in 2022, while CEO pay jumped 4.4%. Let's bring in David MacDonald, senior economist at the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, to dig through these numbers. David, my goodness, what a way to start the new year. But we generally have this conversation. It feels every single year you're talking about CEO pay going up and up and up. So talk to us a little bit about these numbers in 2022 and how much of a surprise it is or isn't.
Well, this is really a story about inflation and has been for the last couple years. Inflation has been great for corporate profits. We've seen corporate profit margins way out of historic norms in 2021 and in 2022. Now, how this relates to CEOs is that they are paid primarily on bonuses. So 84% of their total pay is bonus pay. Only 8% comes from a salary, so very different from how most Canadians are paid. And so when corporate profits go through the roof, bonuses go through the roof. And that's why we're seeing this record pay in 2021 and again this year in 2022. So you really only had to look at corporate profit data, which we've had for some time, to see that this was going to be probably a record year, if not a very high year for CEO compensation. And it was a record year.
Now, this has been a very contentious issue, of course, given that there are so many Canadians across the country who are struggling right now. Those who do not make CEO pay, given the cost of living crisis that we're working through, that we have been working through post-COVID as well. So, talk to us about when it comes to CEO salaries. Give us a bit more of a breakdown. A lot of people might be wondering, is this amount of pay justified?
Yeah, what's interesting about this all-time high in dollar terms is that it's also an all-time high in terms of the ratio of what CEOs make to average workers. So CEOs are just seeing bigger pay increases over time than average workers are. This year, we're closing in on 250 times CEOs making to average workers. When we started tracking this in 2008, it was 150 times. In the 90s, it was 100 times. In the 1980s, it was about 50 times. So the gap is growing substantially over time. It's growing because of these bonuses that you talked about. And certainly inflation, very difficult for consumers in terms of trying to claw back this increase in prices on the wages front. They have been reasonably successful in 2023, but CEOs are being paid as if, on the one side, CEOs say, well, look, this inflation thing wasn't our fault. We're just covering our costs. That's not actually borne out in the data, given how much more profits have gone up. But on the other side, they're paid as if every dime of this increase in prices is absolutely their fault, and they should be paid accordingly. And so that's one of the reasons why we're seeing this record amount of pay. Now, this data is from 2022. 2023 profit margins were more in the historic ranges. That doesn't mean that CEO pay will actually go down next year, as we saw in 2020. Just because times are bad, often bonus formulas are just changed after the fact to ensure that CEOs are insulated from the bad news, even if their bonuses skyrocket in good times.
And looking also at this list, I mean, of the top 100, only 4 are women. I would also ask you, just how diverse in other ways this list might be in the C-suite when it comes to those who are the top paid CEOs in this country. And that is definitely another conversation for another time, because we are out of time here, but we thank you so much for yours. David MacDonald, senior economist at the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives.